Hey, welcome to our channel. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss our latest content.
I always believed I was exactly where I was supposed to be. At 28 years old, after so much effort, so many sleepless nights and countless challenges at work, I had finally achieved the position I had dreamed of since the day I walked out of college with my degree in hand. Now, as a project coordinator for a leading tech firm, I was respected, I was admired by my colleagues, and most importantly, I was well paid. The pride I felt was immense, a warm hum beneath my skin that never quite faded. I had come a long way, and this moment, this life, was living proof that every sacrifice had been worth it. Alongside this professional achievement, there was my marriage, a stable, solid marriage. Graham and I had been together for 3 years. Despite the pressures of everyday life, we led a peaceful existence. He was my anchor. Graham worked as an architect, a job that demanded precision and patience, qualities that defined him as a person, too. When he got home, no matter how drained he was, he made sure to find me, to share the couch with me, to talk about his day and, more importantly, to listen to news about mine. He'd trace patterns on the back of my hand while I spoke, his touch a silent form of validation. We both planned to expand our family, someday, in the future. But for now, we were focused on our careers. We were building a foundation, he'd say, brick by steady brick. Our apartment, with its clean lines and minimalist art, felt like a testament to that shared vision. It was a space of calm, of order, a perfect portrait of a perfect life. I truly believed it was indestructible. That was my first mistake. With my new position came changes. The biggest one was travel. At least once a month, I was told, I would need to visit one of our company's branches to implement new systems and train the local teams. These trips lasted a minimum of 3 days, and according to a strict company policy, born from some long-forgotten incident, no one could travel alone. We always went in pairs. It was a way to ensure safety, they said, and also to divide the responsibilities. That's how I started traveling alongside Reese. Reese was my opposite in almost every way. He had a light, spontaneous way about him, the kind that makes friends with anyone in just 5 minutes. Where I was reserved and analytical, he was an open book, full of easy laughter and quick jokes. He was also married and spoke proudly of his 2 young children. He kept a framed photo on his desk, a smiling wife and 2 kids with missing front teeth. He was the quintessential family man. Right from our first professional meeting, I noticed he was the type who could break the tension in the most serious of meetings with a well-timed, self-deprecating comment. He made work feel less like, well, work. On the first few trips, our relationship was strictly professional. We were a good team. We'd sit together on the plane, laptops open, planning what would be presented. We took care of the details of the training sessions with an efficient, unspoken rhythm. And at the end of the long days, exhausted, we would part ways in the hotel hallway. See you in the morning, Ilara. Good night, Reese. Each of us would retreat to our separate rooms, our separate lives. There was a line, clear and bright, and neither of us even thought about crossing it. But time has its traps, and distance has a way of blurring even the clearest of lines. The change was gradual. So gradual, I barely noticed it happening. It started with dinner. On the nights following our long work commitments, while away from home, it was inevitable to seek some distraction. The silence of a hotel room can be deafening. So, as is common among colleagues who travel together, we began sharing tables at restaurants. At first, the conversation was safe. Work, sports, the terrible hotel coffee, but then, the talk would drift. Reese, with his easy charm, knew how to make me smile. With a well-placed comment about a stuffy client or a funny story about something that happened with his kids, he could transform a lonely, sterile night into something more enjoyable. Something warmer. I, who had always been so reserved, so guarded, gradually let myself be carried away by his lightness. On one of these occasions, somewhere between appetizers and half-empty glasses of wine, Reese commented on how difficult it was to balance work with family life. You know, he said, swirling the red wine in his glass. Sometimes I feel like I'm failing at both. I'm not 100% at work because I'm thinking of home, and I'm not 100% at home because my mind is still on a deadline. A chord resonated deep inside me. I understood exactly what he meant. I feel that too, I confessed, the words surprising me as they left my lips. I feel the weight of my absence. Graham is so self-sufficient, but I know he's alone at home, eating dinner by himself. Between confessions and laughter, the conversation became more personal, deeper. Reese talked about his mistakes as a husband, about the times he got lost in routine and forgot their wedding anniversary. He spoke of feeling disconnected from his wife sometimes, as if they were two ships passing in the night. I confessed that I, too, felt overwhelmed. As if it were impossible to be an exemplary professional and a present wife at the same time. I spoke of a quiet loneliness I sometimes felt, even when Graham was sitting right next to me, a void I couldn't name. With each trip, these conversations took up more space. Soon, we no longer talked much about work. The confidences grew. The stories became more intimate, and the smile that was once casual now carried a different meaning. It was a smile of shared secrets, of mutual understanding. I noticed the growing closeness, of course I did, but I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment I started feeling differently. Reese's gaze became a comfort. His words filled a void I didn't even know existed. He saw the tired, overwhelmed woman behind the perfect project coordinator, and I saw the vulnerable man behind the cheerful family guy. We were creating a bubble, just the two of us, far away from our real lives. A safe harbor, miles and miles from home, and it felt dangerously good. On our third trip together, the connection between us was a palpable thing, an electric current in the air that hummed even when we were silent. A single look was enough for us to understand what the other wanted to say. In the company hallways back home, we maintained our professionalism, but during the trips, everything changed. It was a Thursday night. We'd just finished another intense day of meetings and training sessions. We were both drained. "Dinner?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. I simply nodded. We decided to eat at the restaurant attached to the hotel. The food was good, the atmosphere was calm, and the exhaustion made us laugh at simple, stupid things. Dinner stretched longer than planned. The waiter brought the second bottle of wine. Between glasses and memories, we forgot any boundaries that had previously existed. We were no longer Ilara and Reese, colleagues. We were just two lonely people, finding solace in each other's company. When the restaurant closed, we didn't want the night to end. We walked to the hotel bar and continued drinking. The soft jazz music seemed to perfectly match the low, intimate words we exchanged. I felt light, as if the weight of the week, the weight of my entire life, had vanished. Reese spoke about how he felt invisible at home sometimes. Just a provider, a problem solver, and I, between sips of Chardonnay, confessed that I felt my husband's absence even when he was there, sitting next to me on the couch. That his quiet stability sometimes felt like a wall I couldn't climb. Between muffled laughs and lingering glances, Reese reached across the small table and held my hand, just for a moment, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I didn't pull away. His touch was warm, comforting. For a brief second, the entire world fell silent, and only the two of us existed there, in that dimly lit bar. That night was the turning point. I had no idea what was about to happen, but I already felt that something inside me was different. I was different. And as I left the bar alongside Reese, without rushing, without speaking, I crossed an invisible line. A line from which I could never return. The hotel room was wrapped in an uncomfortable silence, the kind of silence that presses down on your shoulders and tightens in your chest. I opened my eyes slowly, my mind still a confusing haze, trying to piece together fragments of the night. My head throbbed, each beat a memory trying to surface. The first thing I noticed was the bitter, sour taste of alcohol still lingering on my tongue. The second was the smell. A mix of my perfume and his cologne and stale liquor, invading my nostrils harshly. I turned my head, and that's when reality revealed itself, completely and brutally. Reese was there. Already awake. Already getting dressed in a hurry. His gaze was lost, as if searching for a way out of something even he couldn't explain. His expression wasn't one of tenderness or affection. It was pure panic. I remained motionless, paralyzed, watching his every move. Words escaped me, trapped by the massive lump that had formed in my throat. He avoided looking directly at me, his eyes darting around the room as if the walls themselves were judging him. After finishing dressing, he took a deep breath, his eyes finally fixed on the floor in front of him. He said in a low voice, heavy with guilt, "This was a mistake, Ilara." He paused, then repeated it, the words sharper this time. "A terrible mistake." I was still trying to process what was happening. Each word he said made me sink deeper into the horrifying realization that this was real. It had happened. I knew this should never have happened, but I couldn't even formulate a response. I simply nodded, my face flushed with shame, my body unmoving on the disheveled bed. He adjusted his shirt collar, picked up his phone from the nightstand, and walked to the door. He left the room without saying another word, without a single glance back, as if wanting to erase the last few hours from his memory immediately. The click of the closing door was the loudest sound I had ever heard. And then, I was alone, burdened by the unbearable weight of silence and shame. I stared at the ceiling for long minutes, trying to understand how I had allowed everything to reach this point. My head spun from the effects of the drinks, but the guilt burned even more intensely, a fire in my gut. I got up slowly, dressing as if each piece of clothing was a physical reminder of the mistake I had made. Every movement felt heavier than the last. That morning, the mirror reflected a woman I barely recognized. Swollen eyes, a gaunt face, and a lost look. The look of someone who had gambled with everything and lost. The hotel breakfast was almost empty. I grabbed a cup of coffee and sat in a corner, trying to appear invisible. The food wouldn't go down. I couldn't see Reese anywhere. He had disappeared the same way he left the room, leaving behind only a trail of regret that now belonged entirely to me. During the flight back, I tried to focus on work, on the papers I carried in my bag, but my thoughts kept returning to that night. Memories flooded my mind without asking permission. The laughs at the bar, the confessions shared between sips, the moment he held my hand, and later, the way he looked at me before everything spiraled out of control. I remembered the instant we crossed the threshold of my hotel room, both in silence, carrying in our gazes a dangerous mix of desire and disorientation. No words were spoken, only gestures, touches, and quickened breaths that transformed that night into an irreparable mistake. The trip ended with the same silence that had marked that early morning. At the airport, Reese and I exchanged only a discreet, awkward nod. It was a pact of silence, a silent agreement to bury what had happened and move forward, as if we could. When I got home, I hugged Graham so tightly I thought my ribs would crack. I buried my face in his chest, inhaling his familiar, clean scent, as if it could erase the memory of Reese's cologne. He smiled, oblivious to everything, happy to have me back. "I missed you," he whispered into my hair, and I felt like a complete stranger in my own life. A fraud. The suitcases were left in the corner, but the real baggage I carried didn't fit in there. It was invisible, silent, and cruel. In the days that followed, I threw myself into work with an unprecedented, frantic intensity. I responded to emails in seconds. I solved problems before they even arose. I worked late, came home exhausted, and fell into a dreamless sleep, hoping to outrun my own thoughts. I was trying to prove to myself, to the universe, that I was still a good, competent person, as if efficiency could somehow compensate for the immense weight I carried. I avoided crossing paths with Reese in the company hallways, averting my gaze whenever I saw him from afar. He was doing the same. We were ghosts to each other. The phone rang frequently. It was Graham, always attentive, always concerned, wanting to know how I was adjusting to my new routine. "Are you okay, Ilara? You seem tired." I would force a calm I didn't possess, disguising the accumulating guilt in my voice. "Just a lot of work. The new role is demanding." Every time he said, "I love you," my heart tightened with a pain so sharp it took my breath away. The nights, once peaceful, became an internal battlefield. I'd wake up several times, my face covered in cold sweat, reliving every detail of that night in the hotel. The flashbacks came abruptly, stealing my sleep and my peace. How could someone live in two worlds at the same time? The devoted wife, and the woman who, for one night, had destroyed everything she believed in. Still, I kept smiling for work photos. I maintained a polite, professional tone in meetings. I pretended everything was under control. But inside, I knew that no matter how hard I tried, that night would never be forgotten. What happened was etched in my memory like a scar I would be forced to face for the rest of my life. A week passed. Then another. The days dragged on as if each one had double the hours. I maintained the mask I had created for myself. I woke up, prepared breakfast, went to work, resolved tasks, answered calls, organized meetings, and smiled at everyone I crossed paths with. I was two people at once, the tireless professional, always ready to solve everything, and the woman who carried a secret that was consuming her from the inside out. Then, I heard through the office grapevine that Reese had requested a transfer to another department, citing personal issues. He was gone within a week. The news came as an immediate, selfish relief. His presence was a constant, physical reminder of everything I wanted to erase. With him gone, maybe I could finally bury that night deep in my mind, lock it away like something that should never be mentioned again. The days returned to their usual routine. Graham and I resumed our life together. And although everything on the surface seemed normal, the weight inside me still suffocated me. Still, I believed with all my strength that the worst had passed. No one knew. No one suspected. That night was locked away, until one random Saturday. A perfectly ordinary Saturday, when everything seemed calm, and fate decided to turn the tables. I was in the kitchen washing dishes after lunch, listening only to the peaceful sound of running water and clinking plates. Graham's phone rang in the living room. I didn't turn around. It was one of those ordinary weekend moments when everything seemed to be in its right place. The ringing stopped, but the silence that followed was different. It was heavy, charged. I found the sudden absence of noise strange, unsettling. I dried my hands on a towel and went to the living room. I found Graham sitting on the edge of the sofa, holding his phone in his hand as if it weighed a ton. His face was pale, ashen. His eyes were wide open, staring at nothing, and his breathing was uneven. I felt my stomach churn, a cold dread washing over me even before he spoke a single word. "Graham?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "What is it? What happened?" He took a long time to respond. When he finally looked at me, his eyes were unfamiliar, like those of a stranger. When he finally spoke, his voice came out low, almost a whisper, a broken sound. "That was Reese's wife." My legs gave out. I had to grab the back of a chair to keep from collapsing. The world tilted on its axis. Graham continued, his gaze piercing me like a blade. "She told me everything, Ilara. You." He paused, letting the words hang in the air between us, heavy and poisonous. "She told me what happened between you two. During the trip." My world collapsed in that single instant. My hands started to tremble uncontrollably. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it would break through. I tried to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come out. My throat felt closed, tight with unshed tears and panic. He repeated the question, this time with more firmness, as if trying to extract from me the truth he already knew. "Is it true?" Cornered, with nowhere left to run, with the weight of all my lies crashing down on me, I confirmed it. Not with words, but with a single, devastating nod. Tears streamed down my face, and every word I finally managed to choke out felt like a knife stabbing my own chest. I explained it was a mistake, that we were out of our minds with exhaustion and wine, that I never intended to hide it forever, but I was so afraid of losing everything we had. I spoke of my regret, of the sleepless nights, of the torment that had haunted me since that day. Graham listened to everything in silence, his face an unreadable mask of stone. When I finished, my voice raw from sobbing, he let out a dry laugh, a laugh completely devoid of humor, heavy with pain and disbelief. His eyes were red, and his face was a mix of pure anger and profound disappointment. He stood up, his words hard as stones. "He regretted it," Graham said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "He requested a transfer, tried to distance himself. And you? What about you, Ilara?" He took a step closer, his voice rising. "If his wife hadn't found out and called me, you would have kept quiet forever. You'd still be smiling, sleeping by my side as if nothing happened." Oh. Those words hit me like a physical punch. I tried to explain that fear had paralyzed me, that I couldn't imagine how to tell him something I myself couldn't accept. I begged him for forgiveness. I knelt on the floor, pleading for him to reconsider, to just talk to me. But Graham remained cold, firm, as if I were already just a stranger in front of him. He stood up and said, his voice flat and empty, "You need to leave. I want you out of this house, immediately." "I'm staying." In despair, I asked where I would go. I begged for us to talk it through, but he was direct, his voice cutting. "That doesn't matter to me. I just know you can't stay here anymore." I packed some clothes in a hurry, still stunned, my body moving on autopilot while my mind reeled, trying to believe this was really happening. Every item I put in my suitcase seemed to carry an enormous weight, as if with each piece of clothing, I was losing a part of my own history. Before leaving, I stopped in front of him one last time, tears still brimming in my eyes, hoping praying he would say something different, say anything to stop me. But Graham simply turned his face away, closing off any possibility of forgiveness. As I crossed the threshold of our apartment, the door closing softly behind me, I knew I was leaving behind not just the house I lived in, but everything I once believed was indestructible. The marriage, the home, the love, all of it was undone. What remained now was the echoing silence of my own guilt and the deafening certainty that some choices don't allow for a return. Time passed like a whirlwind, sweeping away the remnants of what was once my life. The divorce was quick. There were no long disputes or heated arguments. Graham had everything ready, as if he had been preparing for this moment. The separation formalized what had already been decided the moment the truth came to light. I signed the papers with a trembling hand, swallowing the tears that insisted on overflowing. With nowhere else to go, I moved back in with my mother. She welcomed me with eyes full of questions she had the grace not to ask. Deep down, she knew something serious had happened, but she respected my silence, offering shelter without questioning. Her quiet presence was both a comfort and a constant reminder of my failure. I threw myself into my work like a drowning person clinging to a piece of wreckage. My days began and ended with spreadsheets, reports, and meetings. Work was the only place where I felt competent, where I could numb the pain. I avoided curious looks from colleagues. I avoided company parties. I avoided anything that might remind me of the past. Months turned into years. I continued at this relentless pace. That episode, that night, became a ghost that followed my every step, even though no one spoke of it anymore. Colleagues had already forgotten Reese's face. He had completely disappeared from the work environment. But for me, he still appeared in my thoughts, always bringing the same suffocating feelings of regret and failure. I tried to move forward. I accepted invitations for dates. I opened myself up to meeting new people. But no relationship lasted. Whenever I started to trust someone, to feel a flicker of connection, fear took over. A cold, paralyzing fear that I was doomed to repeat the same mistakes. My conversations stayed shallow. Meetings for coffee ended without promises of a next time. I simply couldn't commit again. I had broken the most sacred trust, and I no longer trusted myself. Meanwhile, Graham built a new life. I learned about it through the periphery of my own shattered world. Through social media posts from mutual friends I hadn't yet deleted, through news that always seemed to reach me, even though I didn't want to hear it. He married a sweet woman, a landscape designer known for her generosity. Soon, children came. A boy and a girl. From a distance, he seemed to have found a quiet happiness. A light, easy routine filled with spontaneous smiles and weekend outings to the farmer's market. A life full of the simple beauty we had once planned for. One afternoon, I went for a walk in a park near my workplace. It was a habit I had developed to try to clear my mind between projects. I was walking alone, headphones on, thoughts a million miles away, when I spotted a scene in the distance that made me stop dead in my track. It was Graham. He was there, playing with his two young children, pushing his daughter on a swing while his son chased a soccer ball. His wife sat on a nearby bench, watching them with a serene, loving smile. He looked light. He had a glow in his eyes that I had never seen in all the years we were together, not even in our happiest moments. It was a glow of pure, unburdened contentment. I stayed there, watching from a distance, hidden by the shade of a large oak tree, my heart aching with a familiar, dull pain. But as much as it hurt, there was something about that moment that prevented me from looking away. I realized how his life had taken a beautiful, simple path, a path full of true love. And it was right then, standing in the middle of that park, a silent observer of the life that could have been mine, that I understood what I had never been able to see before. Graham wasn't just the victim of my mistake. He was living proof that some wounds can heal, even if they leave deep scars. His happiness wasn't a punishment for me. It was a testament to his resilience. I took a deep, shuddering breath, and for the first time in a long, long while, I smiled. Not a smile of complete happiness, but a smile of relief, of acceptance. I finally understood that some stories weren't meant to have a storybook ending of reconciliation. Some stories exist only to teach, to show that some choices come at a devastatingly high cost, and that some doors, once closed, never reopen. I turned around and continued on my way, my heart feeling lighter. Deep down, I knew the peace I so desperately sought wouldn't come from a new love, or from a late forgiveness from Graham. or from an unlikely return to the past. The peace was right there, in that silent park, in that silent acceptance. The greatest forgiveness I could ever receive was my own. My life would never be the same, but that didn't mean I had to remain trapped in the past. The lesson was clear, right there before my eyes. Some losses aren't punishments, they're disguised liberations. And on that day, as I left the park behind, I walked away certain that even with all my scars, I could still build something new. Something different, something entirely my own, far from any shadow that had ever been part of my story.